Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stefan Spencer, and today I have Wil Reynolds with us. I'm so excited to have Wil here. Wil is the founder of Seer Interactive, a former teacher with a knack for advising. He's been helping Fortune 500 companies develop SEO strategies since 1999. In recent years, Wil has been leading the charge to leverage big data to break down silos between SEO, PPC, and traditional marketing. Wil, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I want to bring up something that I found really touching and thoughtful and thought-provoking. It was a Facebook post that you had written not too long ago about it being enough. Like, you have enough. I know this has nothing to do with marketing, but maybe it does. That you don't feel the need to have another like vacation home or a boat or whatever. Like, the stuff doesn't feed you, it doesn't fuel you. It's enough, and you're focusing on giving back and not taking any more from the agency coffers and all that. I'm paraphrasing because it was a couple months ago that I read that post, but that struck me, and I wanted to maybe lead with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's funny is I think when you really are content, you get to a point where you well, I never really bought into it. I think the thing for me is I went to school to be a teacher, Steph. So like, I never thought that I would run an agency. Like, I never had these ideas of someday working for myself and building a company and having it grow. I thought I was going to be a teacher making teacher salary. That's where my mental was. So for me, everything's been like a bonus anyway, right? So it's been like, oh my God, look at this thing. It kind of turned into something. And I think that ultimately, I realized that there's just a rat race to life. Like, unless you're at the Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates level, you're pretty much looking at what those people can do and saying maybe it'd be nice to fly in a private plane whenever I have to fly anywhere instead of waiting for TSA. And it's like, you just keep trying to level up your life. And for me, I've never bought into that. And I think what that's going to enable me to do in the future is really take care of my team. I also looked in my community and I just looked at where do I get joy, man? And it's like, okay, cool. I can buy a first class seat, or I can fly private to somewhere or some crazy stuff like that. Or I can invest that in watching my team members or helping my team members pay off their student loans. For me, where do I get more joy? And it's yeah, I'd rather help somebody pay off their student loans, help them to have their kids' college paid for by the time the kid's 6. I would get more joy from that than anything that I could still acquire in life. And coming to that epiphany has been very, very, very freeing.
Mm-hmm. And when did you come to that epiphany? And how?
Well, it started about 4 years ago. I started realizing I was on a trajectory where it was honestly, Stefan, people don't, it's so cliche to say, but you start realizing I'm not doing anything with my money, right? Money and bank accounts kind of can start to become a scoreboard in the same way that I'm constantly trying to run a faster mile, right? I think that money, awards, accolades, all the stuff that comes externally, it can start to become your scoreboard. And then there's never an end to that, right? And I'm well, what's my end state? Well, I want to own my house. Well, I did that 6 years ago. I paid my house off, right? And you start being okay, well then I could get a bigger house, but for what? What is that going to actually do? Am I going to get that much happier from that? No. And I just started thinking of what could I actually do if I kept getting more? And I couldn't think of anything that wasn't completely disgusting. So the one thing was fly private. I was I'd probably fly private, a couple times a year when I have to do long flights. And then my wife was we're not doing that. I don't want to raise my kids to be sitting on a private plane somewhere. And the first time they got to take a school trip and go into TSA, they're sitting there what is this thing? Right? And you're yeah, I don't want to raise my kids that way either. So I literally can't think of anything that I could do. I've had some people interested in acquiring our company. And you kind of go, well, what do you think it could get? And then somebody tells you, and then you're sitting there looking at a number like that, and you're going, what the fuck would I do with that money? What would I do with it? And then you literally are what would I do with it? And for me, I couldn't come up with anything that I was proud of. So then as a result, it was why don't I give it back to the people who helped to create this business? And obviously set up a nice nest egg for myself, but that's already covered. So it's all right, let's just give it back out to the people and the communities in which we live. And that was a pretty simple decision.
Gotcha. And did you end up going down that path of getting acquired, or are you just?
Nope.
No. Okay.
No, I mean, people are still knocking on our doors, but now it's like, I'm starting to look at, so I've got a number next to people's names. And I'm like, if I could ever get them that much, then I would feel like I've done right by them. Right. So for me, if somebody were to ever be interested, it's like, one, I still got to like my job. Right. Like, because I would only have seller's remorse because I'm not going to do anything with that money. So there's no like, oh my God, if I sold the business, I could what? I'm not going to buy anything with that money, right? I'm not going to start another business because I don't think I was that smart at like business. Like I went to school to be a teacher, and I surrounded myself with some really smart people. Like I don't want to start a new business. I like this business. So the last thing I want to do is sell my business to somebody, not enjoy working there, quit, and be sitting around at 47, 48 years old with like, what am I going to do today? Like, what am I going to do? Right. And I'm not going to spend money on. So yeah, for me, man, like, not that it's going to take a lot of money, but it's going to take something more than just money for me. But I also have numbers next to a bunch of people's names. And I'm like, if I could ever get them that number, I'd have to consider something because of what it could do for them, not for what it does for me.
Do you have any aspirations to start a foundation or create some sort of big movement and help save the world or anything like that?
Nope. I'll just do it my own way. I think for me, it's always a balance of time and money. I like to spend time with people, whom I donate to. So like, I'm trying to spend a little bit more time understanding certain things about the prison population, right? And I can just write checks to different organizations, but it's like hear more from those people and put the time in to try to understand what it's actually like for them, what their stories are and whatnot. It usually gives me more motivation to write bigger checks. But like, no, I feel to start a foundation, if anything, I've read something recently from, I think it was called The Billionaire Next Door was the book. And it was like, the more you build a foundation and kind of be out there with it, the more people you attract, right? And I kind of would prefer to just do most of my stuff in my own way and not overly have people go, oh, that guy's got a foundation. Like, let's get our fundraising people to call them. And it's like, I don't want your calls. Like, let me self-discover things that I care about solving. And then I'll go to those folks and see how I can help their organizations hit their goals and objectives.
Got it. So what do you consider to be, there's a book called I think it's the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would be the dysfunctions of an agency?
Oh, dysfunctions of an agency. Do you mean from a business model standpoint, like the things that fundamentally are the business model? You mean more like the people side, like how Lencioni talked about it in the book?
All of it, whatever comes to you.
Honestly, I think one of the hardest things when you're an agency of our size is not being able to make a decision that works for everybody anymore. And then having people judge the decisions you make without the context in which you make them, right? So then it just leads to, oh, they're doing this. And it's like, well, come and ask me why we're doing it. Like, I'm an open book. I'll tell you why we're making the decisions we're making and help you to understand. But I think there's a tension that there's a skepticism, but I understand the skepticism. A lot of people have worked at places where if they didn't take care of themselves, nobody else was. Like, they were seen just as a resource to cost X and get a Y margin back. So there's just a lot of skepticism. I don't think it's an agency only thing. I think it's just a way that people work thing. And I think the pandemic and whatnot has just exacerbated that feeling of mistrust, right? And lack of transparency. But it's like, what's the company going to do? Are they going to make us come back? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? So we've tried to lean into transparency really hard to give people more information so they don't have to try to make it up themselves and try to connect the dots themselves. But I would say that's one of them. I think the other thing, I think this is, again, it's not agency only, but people like to compare themselves to other people's career trajectories without knowing what those people did, right? So I find a lot of times people are like, well, why haven't I been promoted to X or Y? And it's like person X has. And it's like, well, do you know what person X has done? Have you been there for all their deliverables? Have you been there for the meetings where they turned around XYZ client? Nope, 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 nope. Well, I was, right? And I think that we try to compare ourselves to other people's lives with very little information on how they got there. And, for instance, like if you think of successful entrepreneurs, right? It's like, oh man, people want to say, oh, you've run a successful company. It's like, you don't know if my kids don't even recognize me because I'm on the road so much, right? Or that my life is in shambles, or that I missed, spending the last days with my Uncle X because I had to close this deal and then, they passed away before I could get there. Like, that's not successful. Like, at least not to me, at least, right? But I feel like, yeah, there's just a comparison thing, and people don't know. I was recently asked a question around like success, and I was kind of going on that tangent of like, you have no idea if I'm successful or not, right? Like, because my rules of success aren't what you could ever see. Like, oh, how big is the company? How many people do they have? 200 people? Oh, that's success. Oh, how long have you been doing it? 18 years? Oh, that's success. It's like, nah, like making sure that I can spend the time that fills up my heart with my kids, my wife, giving my mom a call, spending time with her. Like, those are the things that make me feel like I haven't allowed this business to swallow me up for what you or someone else out there might see as successful. It's like, but instead, like, I know I'm still spending the time with my mom because she's got, my mom's old. Like, my mom's almost 80. Like, she's got limited time on this earth. Like, should I go close that next deal or maybe go watch the Sixers game with my mom? Like, it's like stuff like that to me, I think is just really important when you look at success.
Right. And also to look at what you could have done or who you could have been if you had made some different choices. That's actually a syndrome. I had no idea. It's like a sister disorder to imposter syndrome. It's called comparative success syndrome.
No way.
Yeah. So I had that. Not only did I have imposter syndrome, I had comparative success syndrome because I looked at who I could have been if I had stayed the path of going through graduate school, because I was a graduate student studying biochemistry. I wanted to cure cancer. I dropped out. I was going to be a PhD in biochemistry. I was going to study viruses. I was going to like all this, be a professor, do research. And I dropped out, and then I joined the internet bandwagon back in 1995. And I, for the longest time, thought I gave something up that was important. And in actuality, I did exactly what I needed to do. Like the timing is divine. The choices I made, it's all perfect. It's all meant to be. But the kind of self-doubting was there for a number of years.
Really? I'm really surprised to hear that you would have imposter syndrome, because you're the kind of person that when I would see you present, the things that you would show were such a different view on how to solve the same problem everybody else in the room was trying to solve. I just remember being like, damn, like, wow, like that guy's really looking at this problem through a new lens. So I'm surprised. See, I'm just so surprised to hear you say that. I really am. Where does that come from for you?
Probably past lives, I would guess, to be honest. We're all work in progress, and who knows how many millennia it took to get to where we're at now. But yeah. Anyways, I'm working on myself, and this is no longer an issue for me. It's more about just showing up in a more intentional, thoughtful way. Not judging people, because I'm big with judgment, and not making kind of surface level decisions, being more thoughtful. Yeah, there's a lot to it. And I had a big spiritual epiphany and stuff over the last few months. So that's for another time. But the idea here is that we're all works in progress, and we learn stuff through our business life. We learn stuff from health challenges. We learn stuff from relationship challenges and family challenges, et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully we all grow from it, spiritually.
You got to be open to all of it, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you can learn from everything. I I just recently interviewed someone and they were like, oh, I can't make the interview. I can't make an interview for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to the hospital for a little thing. Finds out the dude ends up having brain cancer and he's going to die in 9 months. Right. And, you're like, wow, you're interviewing for a job thinking everything's fine. You go in and say, oh, I got to put this on hold and go in. And then they find out you've got a brain tumor and it's like, right. And you got to be open to whatever life gives you that day. I'm a very like in the moment kind of person, not like a YOLO way, but more like
a YOLO way.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah. Because that to me is because life is long, like the news stories only highlight people that died young and we read the news. So therefore, oh, this guy died at 40. It's like, oh my God, right? But they're not like, this many people live to 100, like, right? So it's like life generally is long. And like YOLO is just like a surefire way to end up with a lot of credit card debt and unhappiness.
And it's not even true in so many different ways, not just life is usually long for us, but how many times have we been here, like on this planet, right? Probably hundreds.
Ooh, how did you come to that? Like, I never really dug into that part of spirituality of like, that concept. Tell me about that.
Okay, well, we're getting a little off topic, but I'm happy to give a short answer. In preparation for an interview on my other show on Get Yourself Optimized, which has some spirituality episodes, it has biohacking episodes, etc. I was prepping for an interview of Sheila Gillette, who is a medium, and she channels 12 archangels, and they go by the name of Theo as a collective. And she's the real deal, by the way. She is totally the real deal. So I was prepping for the interview and I watched a video of her saying that on her deathbed, this was back in 1969, she had some complications from childbirth and she was on her way out. So she was praying, God, please let me raise my kids. Let me stay on the planet. Please give me a job. And that really stuck with me. And a few months later, this was January of this year, I was just inspired to start praying, please give me a job. And the veils thinned. I was able to see the matrix. I was able to see times where angels intervened and saved my life. Like when I totaled my car when I was like 23 years old, fell asleep behind the wheel, and I walked away without a scratch. Angels, like angels saved my wife's life just last year from a head-on collision. There's so many things that we just have no clue. And yeah, so that's been quite a rabbit hole, very exciting one, because life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, but there's another level, it happens by you. Right? You're co-creating your reality.
Absolutely. Yeah. Huh. No, it's an area I've never really dug into that deep, to be honest with you. I just haven't dug in that deep. So maybe I'll have to listen to that podcast when that one comes out. Is that already out?
Yeah, that was out in November.
Okay.
And then I had an episode 300 just a few weeks ago where I talk about this spiritual awakening and some of the implications, some of the opportunities that have presented themselves. Like I get messages daily. We are all psychic. We just shut ourselves off because we don't believe it.
Oh, you know what? I'll say this. One of the most weird things for me is once every 2 to 3 months, I will be in a situation that is familiar to me. And I know, and because it freaks me out so much, I'll say to myself, this person's going to do this thing in about 2 minutes. And then I just sit there and let them go and whatnot. And then I'm like, oh my God, they just did it. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, oh, they're going to be breathing in 2 minutes. It's like, they're going to say a word like this, or they're going to do this or that. And it's one of those, because I'm literally like, I've been here. I've seen this thing before. And I know that in 2 minutes, they're going to do X or Y. I'm probably right 75% of the time. And it's just so weird because you're like, yeah, so I won't get on that either. But
it's not weird.
There's
this
something
is how we're
here.
supposed to be.
There's
This is
something
how
there.
this is how life is supposed to work. We are psychic. We are not human beings having a spiritual existence or experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. That's from Wayne Dyer, and it is so true. It is so true.
Ooh.
Yeah. So once you crack open that door, things start happening, and then the door opens wider and wider, and yeah, it's amazing. It all started for me in June of last year when I was interviewing another medium. I don't know why I felt so compelled to have this guy on my podcast, but I just knew I needed to have him on. I met him on a Zoom breakout room in a metal meeting. Metal is a mastermind I'm in, METAL. Great group, a lot of really cool guys in that group. And he's like, I'm an advertising guy, copywriter, and I'm also a medium. I'm like, what? A medium? Like, what do you mean? It's like, well, I was like, and he explained some things. Like, he was one of 700 psychics on this Fox show called The Gifted or something like that, or The Most Gifted. Out of the 700, he was one of the 10 that was selected to be on the show, and then he won.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. And there's a clip on his website on marknelsonmedium.com where you can watch him talking to these three people who are roughly the same age, but he's like, you guys went to school together. He had no information about them. He was just channeling from the beyond. And he's like, you guys went to high school together. Like, yeah. I'm seeing army boots, but it's not a military school. They're like regular classrooms. It's like, you guys went to Columbine. It's like, whoa. You escaped through the back door. You were hiding under.
No.
Yeah. You were hiding in the library, and he got it all right. The only slight, not mistake, but misconception was the person he said was hiding in the library was hiding under the library. But he just nailed it. So this guy won that show back in the day, and he saved a family member's life of mine while I was interviewing him. What are the odds, right? Zero, essentially. 0% chance that he would save my family member's life. I didn't do any interviews except for him. It was a 3-week time period. And at that moment in time, while I was interviewing him, my family member was having a stroke. And she didn't believe it. She wasn't going to go to the hospital. And he said, no, she absolutely is. Saved her life. So that opened the door. That was my first experience of like, wow, this is a thing. I really shouldn't be discounting it.
You know what's so interesting is the things we discount. The things we discount that someday you see through a different lens, to me, is always like really interesting, because you want to go out to the world and be like, I'm not the person that believed in this. Like, I'm not that guy. I'm not that girl. Like, I didn't believe in this thing, but like, how else could this outcome have happened? Like how else could that have happened? And I've had one or two small things in my life that were similar, where you're like, I'm not that guy. So when you hear me talking about this, don't think that I'm some like person that believes in all this stuff. It's like, but I'm a believer now, right? In whatever that thing is. So
yeah,
I too have had not that level, but just things that I was like, yeah, sure, you can do blah, 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 blah. And then you find out it did at the same time as something. And you're like, that could be coincidence still, but like, how could it be coincidence that just at this time, at this thing, that this happened? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally like, there are no coincidences. There's nothing random. And that's part of my new clear seeing, clairvoyance from having been given this job. And it's running an agency is not the job I was given. So I remember I prayed for a job. So part of the gift that I've been given is this clear seeing but It's amazing when these things start happening, and they've been happening all along. We just didn't see them through the lens of like, wow, that chance meeting with somebody who became my business partner or who became my spouse or became my best friend was not chance. It was actually predestined, and we made that soul contract or that decision before even incarnating. And like, whoa, and just let's to preface this all by saying I was agnostic my whole life up until age 42. So I was one of those people who like discounted all of it. I was the skeptic.
So now, how is it talking to people about it? Because people are going to probably like you up until this point. If somebody had to talk to you at age 39 or 38 or 37, you would have had a certain type of reaction that I imagine people may have that reaction when they talk with you. How do you try to help people to see there might be something there on something that they're so skeptical about? Or are you like, I don't do it. I don't try to convince the unconvincible.
Right. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm calibrating. And I let things go the way that they're going to go. Right. So I didn't know we'd be talking about this on the podcast, on this episode. No idea. I'm being led by my intuition, and I'm willing to take the risks. If it feels right, it probably is right. And sometimes people are so closed off, they don't want to hear it. But the people who are listening to this podcast, even though it's a marketing show and it's not my other show that gets pretty woo-woo, there's something about me and about my message and about how I show up in the world that resonates. And so they continue to listen to the show. They're probably not haters listening to this episode. And they're probably, if they don't really like me that much, they're probably not listening to this part of the episode. They probably turned it off already. So that's cool. I'm not here for the frowny faces. I learned this from Bob Allen, who's written many New York Times bestsellers, millions of copies of books sold. And he said, you're not here for the frowny faces. You're only here for the smiley faces. Stop trying to convince or win over the frowny faces, whether it's an audience in a conference and you're the keynote speaker, or it's a book that you're writing and you're trying to please everybody with it, not create polarity or any kind of hate mail or anything. Just serve the smiley faces. You're there for them. They're there for you. And the frowny faces are, they're going to do what they're going to do.
I think also you risk not being your authentic self when you are trying to turn around the frowny faces, so to speak, right? You start trying to become something that is either unnatural or not who you really are, to try to say like, oh, can I turn around a couple of those? And then maybe you miss opportunities to connect with people, I think broadly I'm with you on like, I kind of let life take me where it goes.
You get these intuitive hits, and I recently learned that an intuitive hit is one that comes in unexpected. It's charge neutral. There's no anxiety or fear or any kind of negative or even positive emotion associated with it, like excitement or anything. And it doesn't lead anywhere else. It just sits there. It just simply is. It's not going to jump to the next thought and then the next thought and the next thought. Like typically our subconscious mind is just at work all the time, just ricocheting from one place to another. It just sits there. And when you get an intuitive hit that fit those criteria, treat it as if it's a divine message, because it is. It's either from your higher self, it's from angels, it's from God, and it's not just another synapse firing from your subconscious mind. And if you take that perspective and so somebody comes to your mind and you're like, wow, I haven't thought of that person or talked to that person for years, reach out. Right? Oh my goodness. I've never thought that X, Y, and Z would make that big of a difference. But then that person that I called they were about to commit suicide and I interrupted them. And then they're like, what the hell am I even doing this for? Right. Or whatever, you know, it's like, there are no coincidences.
Oh my God. If I listened to everything I thought of that way, though, I'd be literally on the phone calling my friends or old people in my life all the time. Because like you have these thoughts, right? And you're like, why am I even thinking about that? And then you just get back to work and move on. I also like letting somebody know that they're being thought of.
You should totally try this, even if it's just for a week. Take this as an experiment. Those people that pop into my mind, and it's like that person popped in my mind and then it led to another person or another thought or whatever, you can let those go. But if somebody just stays there in your mind, like just for a week, humor me and follow those intuitive hits.
Well, you know what's funny? I had something like that a little bit yesterday where I went to the doctor and I got a clean bill of health, and it made me think of someone that I work with who I was like, let me check in on them and see how their health is, right? Just one of those things, right? Like I'm thinking about my own health, but then immediately I think about the health of other people. And I'm like, let me just ping this person. And obviously things are all good and they're doing fine. But I am already starting to try to listen to that part of me that's like, why am I sitting here thinking about this instead of just being like, hey, I'm thinking of you.
So here's the thing. You didn't think of just random people on the team. You thought of that person.
Mm-hmm.
And that person says, I'm fine. Does that mean they're truly fine? That was an intuitive hit, probably, unless, you know, it just led to something else and then something else and something else, right? Probably was an intuitive hit. So you could encourage them to go see a doctor, get their checkup or whatever, if they their annual physical, if they're, you know, past due on that. You could invite them to try some sort of medical modality that they have not tried before. Like, I don't know, I've done health nucleus, which is a full body MRI scan and a whole battery of blood tests and everything. And rich people do it. I learned about it from Peter Diamandis. They do it every year and it saves a lot of people's lives, but it's never covered under insurance. So you just pay out of pocket. So I've done that a couple of years in a row so far, and nothing concerning so far. And, you know, thank God. And imagine if somebody got a scan that was just, I don't know, out of the blue. There wasn't some sort of symptom that caused them to be concerned, but somebody said, you know what, you should try this. Or
how do you do that without feeling like you're putting someone off or like being a little bit pushy about it?
You just be honest and say, like, this probably sounds a little crazy or at least pretty woo-woo, but I'm starting to pay attention to my intuitive messages and sense it. And I have this intuitive sense that it'd be good for you to go get a scan or some sort of checkup or something. Because it was that person who came to your mind. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I should totally offer free MRI scans every year to my entire team or whatever.
Yep.
And that could be an intuitive hit too, if it just comes to your mind. But this was specific to one person. So I wouldn't discount it.
You would listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times what happens is I'll just reach out to somebody. I'll say, you know, I was thinking about you, and like, well, that's weird because I was just thinking about you. And it was years of no contact or whatever. That happens. We are all connected. And then I find out that somebody needed something right at that moment that was so profound and powerful or whatever. And I'm just the messenger. I'm just the delivery person. I'm not creating this miracle for this person. And in fact, I'm in a group of people who that's a mastermind of 7 guys who are reading a book together called You Were Born for This, which is all about delivering miracles to people on an everyday basis. And one of the meetings, one of the guys said, you know, I felt compelled to give a big tip to this waitress. Just something spoke to me about, like, I don't know. I offered her, I said, how would $107 tip sound to you? And she started sobbing, and she showed a text message to him and his family. His mom had asked earlier in the day, do you have $107? I can't afford this medication.
Stop it.
And the daughter's
Stop
like,
it.
I can't, I'm sorry. I'm not even making enough to cover my own bills. Yeah. Like this stuff
shit.
is so part of our experience, and yet we pretend that it doesn't exist, that we're just, human beings having a spiritual experience, but we're spiritual beings. It's wild. And the fact I'm in that mastermind is also a miracle. It happened shortly after I was given the job, which is still being revealed to me. I mean, the aspects of it are still unfolding. But this guy just randomly, not random, but he said, I'm putting this mastermind together. We're starting in a week. You want to be in it? And that happened. We were having a conversation on Zoom because I met him on a Zoom meeting with Joe Polish has this podcast called I Love Marketing, and they have a monthly Zoom meeting. And he reached out to me on Zoom chat. We hadn't even spoken. He's like, I want to have a call with you. And I just felt compelled in the middle of our conversation to say, you know what? There's this book that I feel like I need to tell you about. It's called Your Utmost for His Highest. I haven't even read it, but I think this is a book that's going to be good for you. And he's like, wow, that's weird, because that's one of my favorite books. This is a book from the 1920s. It's not like a new bestseller or something. And he's like, I have it on my bookshelf right there. I've read it 4 times. And then later on in that conversation, it's like, I'm putting this mastermind together. We're reading this book. It's all about delivering God's miracles in everyday life. And I feel like I need to invite you to it, that you're supposed to be in it. I'm like, I'm in. I knew that was not just random. That was meant for me.
Stefan, do you think that the state of the world, people are sometimes too busy to listen to those signals, like that they like let them kind of pass through, because you have to be open with your time enough to say, you know what, let me join this thing. Let me, not reach out, because reaching out is relatively easy, but like, to put an hour block on your schedule sometimes to just see what might come of something for some people is just like, well, I could have done all these other things in that hour, and maybe this is worth it. Maybe it's not. Like, how do you advise people on that?
The first step is the willing suspension of disbelief. If you set that aside and you just say, you know what, I'm going to be open. And maybe I don't have the time to respond to every call or every calling that's given to me from above, but I'm going to be open to at least receiving it. And you can even ask and say, I need to see a without a doubt sign. Like this will freak some of my listeners out. One of my team asked her mom, who had passed, to send a without a doubt sign. And then 5 seconds later, there's an owl sitting in the street right when she turns it was blocking her path in the car. Like, and it stared her down for like 5 minutes, and she knew that was her mom.
Holy shit. Well, because, it's funny, right? Like, I get intuitions about, people ask me for this or that. And I'm always like, sometimes I've had random meetings that have gone in a very different direction, and they were very valuable. Mm-hmm. And then I've had times where I'm like, man, what I wouldn't do to get that hour back, because I could have spent that hour with my kids. I could have spent that hour doing something else. And I'm trying to figure out, based on what you're saying, right? Like, how many of those things do you listen to, or how do you get stronger at determining where you put that time in?
It's attention. It's not time. time is an illusion.
Mm.
It's our attention. We're in the ever-present now. And so if I'm feeling called to spend time with my son, who's a little toddler right now and he needs me, then I will do that. If I'm feeling called to just drop everything and make a phone call to somebody who I hadn't thought of for several months, I'll do that.
Yep.
But here's the thing: if you're trying to do what in Hebrew is known as a mitzvah, my wife is Israeli and Jewish, and so I'm learning a lot about Judaism. We study Kabbalah and stuff, and so a mitzvah is a good thing, like a good deed that earns you brownie points in heaven, right? And if you harm somebody in the process, that defeats the whole purpose. Don't do it. So you're like, okay, I need to carve out this amount of time to pray, and then I'm going to leave my wife with our crying baby in order to take that time and do the prayer. That's no bueno.
Huh.
All right. So you're taking time away, like you have this magic moment with your child and you're saying, you know what, I actually need to drop everything and make this phone call. That's probably not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Don't do a mitzvah if it's going to cause harm to others.
It's just one of those things, you because it's weird. Like I've had some random, really good conversations, but then I always tend to think of this concept of, whether you're right. Like it's attention, right? It's like, yeah, it's just, wow, man. Yeah. It's definitely one of those, like, I just look at everything as having a cost. Right. And it's like, there is a cost to me putting my attention into something that comes at the expense of something else. But what I think you're saying is, and it's something that I've had to learn in my work, is I know what fills up my bucket. And when you know what fills up your bucket, it's easier to be like, yes, if I can get home every night and put my kid to bed and spend that like 15 minutes with him talking about Pokemon, if that fills my bucket, then I'm good. If my bucket gets filled by 4 hours of that time, then I need to adjust my life to fill that bucket up in the way that, you know what I'm saying? Like you almost have to listen to yourself, at least for me, and realize like people will say like, oh, well, if you sold your business, you did this or that, like think about how much more you could do for the things that you're concerned about in the world. And I'm like, I feel like I'm doing enough, right? And it's like, I feel my bucket is full with what I'm currently doing. Because if it wasn't, I would move my life around to fill that bucket up more than I currently am, right? So I feel like trying to be in tune with that has been helpful, at least for me.
Yeah. Well, you can fill your bucket up with sand or pebbles or rocks or boulders. But if you put in the boulders first, then the rocks and then the pebbles and then the sand,
yeah.
right? So that makes everything work much better. So if I start my day by doing a meditation, by doing prayer, connecting, and asking to be a delivery agent for miracles. If I like, and my kind of daily practice, I'm asking God, I'm here I am, please send me. And we don't get sent to do things that are super easy and just, within our comfort zone. We are challenged to stretch, but it's never more than we can handle. And if we don't ask for it, we're probably not going to get it. But I go out of my way by asking for it. I say, I want this. And boy, do I get them. It's like when my friend said, I'm going to put some money aside, and that's not even going to be considered mine. This is in the book, and You Were Born for This. It's called having a God pocket. You have a pocket with some cash in it that's there that you're just holding to. It's meant for others. It's not even yours. You're just holding on to it. And handing over $107 out of his God pocket was called to do that day. And boy, did he make a difference in that person, in their life. And you let the miracle happened because it's not you, you're just delivering it. You make sure that you give the credit, you transfer the credit over to your higher power instead of saying, yeah, well, that's yeah, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? No, you say, look,
So
this is
interesting to
all
think of it as
God.
not
This
for
is-
you. It's interesting to think as I'm holding this for somebody else. That's an interesting, it's like conceptually, it's like it's a different thought process.
Yeah.
I'm holding this for somebody else. That's interesting.
Right.
I
Imagine
think,
how much you can do with your God pocket if you have more resources. I mean, you have been blessed with so many resources that not everybody else gets. So, yeah, it's great that you're feeling fulfillment and, you know, full bucket and everything, but there is more. There is more that you can do. There's more joy to be had. There's more impact to be had. Not that you have to drop everything you're doing and you know, go climb a mountain and hang out in a cave for 20 years or you know, become the next Mother Teresa. It does give you a lot more opportunity to step up, though, with the resources that you have and that I have. So it's the more you stretch, the more you're going to benefit. Ultimately, it's like karma isn't just about not doing harm to others because you're going to get it back 10 times. It's about the beautiful good works that you do, and even better, the miracles that you deliver. Those get 10x'd and come right back to you too. It's fun.
Oh, dude, now you got me. It's funny because this concept of holding on to it for somebody else will stick with me. Like that's going to stick with me for sure. Because that is just a totally different way of looking at
Well, here's a whole
the
book
impact
on that,
you get to have
just
on the
on that
world.
topic. It's called The God Pocket. Bruce Wilkinson has an
What-
entire book
the
just
God
on
pocket.
that. The God Pocket. Yeah.
I'm I'll read it.
Awesome.
Thank you for that.
You bet.
Well, damn, we went all over the place. But you know what though? I'll tell you this, like you, I'm just kind of open to where life takes me. It's interesting. Like,
Yeah.
recently I've had some constraints on my schedule that I chose to allow to be there, right? I made the decision. I said, yeah, I will have this. But before that, I never would book meetings back to back because I always wanted to leave time for something that could just continue, right? And sometimes you want that time to be like, I don't want to rush this, right? So I always used to never have back-to-backs because sometimes it was that extra 5 or 10 minutes that came after something that created all the difference, you know, and you don't want to feel like you're rushing through that. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that because I've always just believed in the fact of like, don't rush through life, man. Like,
Yeah.
sit sometimes with something, even if it's an extra 15 minutes, but sit with that, you know?
So true. And this reminds me of a quote from Dan Sullivan, founder of Strategic Coach, which is an incredible mastermind I've been in for several years now. He says that those entrepreneurs who are too tightly scheduled cannot transform.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So it's funny when we were chatting before and you're like, oh, Will, are you the founder? I'm like, yeah, kind of. Like the real role that I play is I'm our VP of innovation. And it's like, I need time to play, you know? And when I've been able to transform the way that certain things are done. But if you're so tightly scheduled, I think the hard part is it's one of those things that people look at from a distance and it's like, I would like to do that too. I'd like to sit around and just have time to think. And it's like, yeah, but you got to be able to say with time to think, I've created something of value, right, in the marketplace. It's one of the things I always talk to people about. And they're like, man, I wish I just had another 20% of my time. I'm like, well, at some point, like that extra 20% of time has to pay dividends somewhere, or companies wouldn't have a margin. It's like you gotta find a way to take that extra time and turn it into value, or find someone else who can turn that 20% of time into value, right? In an organization that might be able to take advantage of that thing. But it's always one of those interesting things, I think, when I tell people about my job, that they're like, oh, that would be great to sit around and think. And it's like, well, it's not just that I sit around and think, though, right?
It's part of your job, though, to sit around and think. If you don't do that, then you're not stepping into your greatness. And in the book, The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham, he's a funny guy too. He's so smart, very down to earth guy. So he talks about having a thinking chair that he only sits in when he's going to think. And that thinking is some of the most important stuff that he does in the week. And he schedules time to do it. Yeah. So The Road Less Stupid, a great book. And what a great concept to have a thinking chair that you only sit in when you're going to think, and you don't do anything else in that chair. You don't bring your cell phone and start flipping through Instagram or anything like that. You're only thinking, and he schedules it.
It's smart because it is a physical thing that snaps you into where you should be mentally, right? Like, oh, when I sit in this chair, whereas like, I think in all kinds of places, it's one thing to be like, I'm going to go sit in the place. That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's
another one I'm going to take.
Yeah.
It's an anchor. Exactly. Dude. Yeah. Well, man, anything else you got for me? I mean, like I've taken some really interesting fucking concepts from our chat today.
I think our listener has too. And I know we're at time here. I want to be respectful of your schedule. And I think the world of you, Wil, and I'm happy to know you.
Dude, likewise. And it's funny, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. Like, again, like I with you, it's always been a way that you thought. Like, I saw things that you were doing when I was early in my search career that I was like, everything this guy is showing makes sense. And I think at times you would look at the audience or the crowd and you'd be like, some people see this as a threat. Upton Sinclair's got a quote that's something like, it's hard to convince a man of something if his job depends on it or his salary depends on it. And like, I remember being like, but that's separate from whether or not that risks the work that I'm doing today, from whether or not this guy's right. And whenever I saw you present on stage, there were things that I was like, ooh, that's a little uncomfortable given how I see value and how I create value, but like, it's obviously the right thing, right? So I've always really respected the way that you've thought and the way that you've brought solutions to things in ways that a lot of other folks have just accepted as the way it's done. And you've always found a different way to look at it. So maybe one of these other days we could chat about what's on your mind, if you got anything like that brewing. Because sitting in the audience and watching you present definitely gave me a sense of like, damn, like it almost became like if you were presenting somewhere, I didn't even really care about the title so much as I was like, there's a good chance that this guy's going to make me think differently than I walked in thinking. And today's just another freaking example of that.
Oh, well, thank you for that, Wil.
I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you too. So let's send our listener to whatever websites, resources that you want to send them to. Of course, seerinteractive.com and wherever else.
Follow me on Twitter and you can go from there.
Okay.
Wil Reynolds with one L, WIL Reynolds.
Awesome. Thank you, Wil. And thank you, listeners.
It, brother. Have a great day, man.
Okay. Take care.